This is Professional Launch with Rico Aladdin, positively connecting the less connected, bridging gaps, and building futures in the community. Professional Launch with Rico Aladdin.
Hello, professionals. My name is Rico Aladdin, and I'm the founder of Professional Launch and the host of the Professional Launch Show on WDOY. And today, my guest is the former mayor of OS. Now, you know that is graduation season. Big congratulations is in order for those who are graduating this season. Now, I want to remind you, just because you graduate doesn't mean that the learning is done. So, like my former professor used to told me, when you finish college, that's when you start learning. So get ready. Exactly. Mayor Kory Peterson, thank you for being on the show today. Please introduce yourself for the Professional Launch audience.
All right. Good to see you again. Like I said, it had been a little while, so I'm glad we were able to talk again. Yeah. Again, Kory Peterson. I was been in the tech industry for 40 years. Started my career back in 1984. I actually went to school at UND. I should say back up a little bit. I'm from Catherine, North Dakota. Graduated from Litchfield High School at the time. They've consolidated since. And I went to school at UND. I was in chemical engineering for 3.5 years and gave it up for Lent. I just wasn't enthusiastic about it anymore. And so I talked to a counselor, and he said, "So what did you like?" And I said, "Well, I kind of enjoyed the computer class I took." He says, "Well, why don't you take a couple of classes with that and see what you think?" And then, as they say, the rest is history. I graduated with that and made a career out of programming.
Yeah, so you've had such a diverse career from weather research to city government. What has anchored you through all these transitions?
Well, okay, so one of the things is a curiosity. I was really into, when I got into the computer field, there were things that I wanted to do or just to explore. Mm-hmm. And I got the opportunity at UND to work with the meteorology folks doing weather graphics and things like that, actually taking radar images and putting them up on a IBM AT way back then. That was kind of neat. And then the second thing was I kind of got ambitious and started my own company in 1985, where I did pedigree software for breed associations. And that was back in the old days of an IBM PC with the double-sided, double-density floppy drives. And so that was kind of neat. And then from there, things I got involved with down in the Twin Cities. I was working for a semiconductor-oriented company where we did robotics for wet benches, processing discs or wafers, as they call them, for semiconductor industry. So that was kind of neat. I worked in the weather game again down there. There was a company called Kavoris that pretty much everybody through the 90s would have seen. If you watched WDAY's weather, they had the Kavoris equipment, and I was working on that. And then I did biometrics software. I also worked on, if you see those cameras that are over the different highways or different avenues and streets in town here, they're called autoscopes. And I worked at that company for a year where they actually, as opposed to putting loops in the road to monitor when the traffic lights turn, they use cameras. That was kind of revolutionary back then. Biometrics was the fingerprint readers, voice recognition, retina scans, that kind of stuff. That was interesting. Did that for a while, and that's what got me back up to the Fargo area. There was a company in town here that was doing that. And that was our second startup, then it was our third startup that we did there. And did that for a while. Then I got into the fleet vehicle tracking with GPS. That was kind of cool. That was fun being able to do that. Got done with that. I started working over at Wex Health doing healthcare software. And then I got 2 years where I was working at Noridian doing supervisor work for software automations and stuff like that. So it's been varied. And, I did on one of my side projects that we did was automating grain handling facilities, one up in Manitoba and one in South Dakota, where we managed batch feeding for different barns that, cattle and swine and chickens and stuff like that. So.
Well,
pretty varied career.
Yes. This is something that I really want to talk to you a little bit more about, because this show is about helping young professionals who are in college or trying to find a career path. Just to when I talk to folks like you who are successful and have been involved in different career paths, and what they can learn from you can serve them to go a long way. And one thing I wanted to chat, you changed your major, and then you switch your major to from chemical engineering
Yes.
to computer science. Is
Correct.
that right?
hmm
So what led you to study computer science, and how did you break into your first tech role?
So what happened was, like I said, I wasn't happy with what I was doing, so I went and talked to one of the counselors on campus, and he said that, what did you like?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in 1980, we took a class. It was Fortran, and that was back in the days where you had to do punch cards, and then you had to wait in line and feed it through a machine and wait patiently, sometimes for a long time, to get an output.
Mm-hmm.
As frustrating it was, there was a lot of sense of accomplishment when you actually got it to work, and I kind of enjoyed that. So that's what I told him. I said I enjoyed that class. So I went in and he said, well, let's sign you up then for like a couple of computer science classes and see what you think. So I took them, and I enjoyed them a lot. We were past the punch card thing, and we could actually punch into a terminal, but we had to start with a 300 baud acoustic modem where you actually had to dial a number, wait to hear the beep in the phone, put the phone on the coupler, hit Control C many times before it would sync up, and that's how we typed in our programs back in the day. I enjoyed that. We learned so much just from going from that transition, and that's when I bought my first PC, so I could sit in my apartment and work off a 2400 baud modem and I don't have to stand in line for anything anymore. It's just, you learn things as you go. I think, we talked about startups and things like that. One of the things that I was really, unfortunately, but I had a pretty good idea that I'm going to make this company work. I'm going to, so I went and got a hold of an attorney, and we went through all the incorporation proceedings. I got a big thick book at home that's got all my incorporation papers in it. And she asked me, well, how much money do you think you're going to generate the first year? Oh, I figure, this is thinking 1985 now. I figure, I should be able to do at least 2 or 3 million, to get going. And you're highly optimistic, right?
Yeah.
So she said, okay, well, let's do a C Corp then, and I thought, yeah, that sounds good. So we went through all that process. In hindsight, I should have went with an S Corp. It's that I wish I'd had more mentors to help me then. And that's the thing, it's like, if I'd have spent a little bit more time maybe talking to some other people, I might have avoided some of the mistakes that I made with that, like being overly optimistic with my projections. Yeah. Incorporating properly, depending upon what you're going to be doing. There's different ways to incorporate that will assist you better than just doing a blanket, C Corp, that'll work every time. No, it won't.
Yeah. My goodness. So you from what you were saying earlier and from your bio, I get to see that you were part of 4 different startups. What is the biggest risk you ever took professionally, and what did you learn from it?
Well, let's see. The biggest risk probably would have been with our biometric one. We kind of started out with, we'd split away from another company, and of course there got to be concerns about whether we were stealing intellectual property, and we weren't. We started all over, but of course that kind of loomed with us a little bit. So that was kind of risky. And we did actually wind up going to court on it. We prevailed, but it's still, you have to waste some resources on that. But we were able to get a piece of software. We actually went over to China to witness a keyboard manufacturer opening because we wanted to incorporate fingerprint readers into the keyboards. And they were going to do this for us. So we went over there, went through their whole grand opening, which was really cool, where they blow off a whole 10,000 fireworks and have the dragon go through the building to get rid of evil spirits. It was great. I mean, it was an awesome adventure. So we got the software ready to go, incorporated all these different biometric devices and stuff like that. And we had our release candidate done. We were going to start packaging the software, and 9/11 happened. And everybody freaked out, and our investors walked away, which I don't blame them. I mean, everybody was freaking out after that. But we were done in 30 days. And that was hard, having to close that up when you've got your heart and soul into that thing. Because everybody, when you do a startup, you work as long as it takes to get things done, and that was hard. So that was probably the biggest risk, and then wound up like that, So, but that's what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to take a short break here. When we come back, I'm going to ask the mayor, what's the one mistake that he made early in his career, and what lesson did he learn from that? We'll be right back. We are back. Today, we have the former mayor of Hoas here in the studio for a professional launch. And before we went to break, I had a question for him. And the question was, what that one mistake that you make? I know you have probably have many. Yes. And so, what's the biggest mistake you've made early in your career, and what valuable lessons that come from that mistake?
So yeah, like we were joking off air here.
Yeah.
You make different mistakes. Some of them are a little bigger than others. I
Mm-hmm.
won't say this was probably the bigger one that happened, and it was because I didn't ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
When I was on vacation in 1990, we flew through Minneapolis, and I picked up a Star Tribune paper. Started looking through the ads, to see if what was to see if, what was out there.
Yeah.
And I ran across an ad where they were looking for a Pascal programmer to do work for robotics. Like, ooh, that sounds fun. So I got home and talked to the wife a little bit, and I said, I think I'll just send him a resume and see what happens. So I did. Guy called me up. We talked on the phone a little bit. He says, why don't you come on down for an interview? So I did that. And I got a call about a week and a half later saying, gave me an offer, and I thought, boy, let me think about that and talk to the wife, because we had to kind of do this together.
Yeah.
And we talked about it for a little bit, and I said, yeah, okay, that sounds like a good idea. So we packed up everything, moved into an apartment down there, and I was working there. And I was there for like a week and a half, and they wanted to send me down to Dallas to do troubleshooting on one of these wet stations, as they call them.
Mm.
And I didn't even know what it was, to be honest with you. They were just pretty much saying, we need somebody to go check this out. So he gave me a check, told me to go to the bank and, get some spending cash. Well, I went to the bank, and they couldn't cash the check because there wasn't any money in that account. Came back to the office, told him, he says, oh, here, he flipped me a couple $300 or whatever he had in his wallet. And he said, we'll square it up when you get back. Okay. Didn't even think anything of it.
Mm-hmm.
And about a month later, they filed for bankruptcy.
Oh no.
And it's like, ooh, wow, okay. So we just moved down here, I didn't ask the questions. I didn't, go around. It was just, like everybody's solid company, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, they filed for bankruptcy. They let some people go, but we had a couple of things that had to get finished. So we finished those we promised we'd get checks, that type of thing. And so when that got done, then they closed up the place, and there were two of my managers got a hold of me after that and said, would you be interested in like keeping this going? I said, I'd love to keep it going. So they found some money. There was about 6 of us then that got a startup going to continue this business. And we worked out of the back of a manufacturing warehouse. They had some space, we leased it, and we kept that going for about a year and a half. But then this would have been in about 92. The semiconductor industry started changing, where the Koreans and the Japanese were dumping memory chips on the market. So the capital equipment area was starting to dwindle because they didn't want to buy any more equipment until they knew where this was going, because the prices were going down. And so we were trying to sell capital equipment to a market that was almost non-existent there for a while. So, but it worked out. The valuable lessons that you learned is make sure you ask questions.
Yep.
And especially now when you have the internet, you can find out a tremendous amount on the company before you even go set foot in the door for an interview.
Yeah.
Ask questions at the interview. Don't ask them if they're solvent, but I mean, just talk about their clients, or ask them questions, because I think they expect that. And if you don't ask questions, then it's almost like you're not interested.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
not that you have to ask an hour's worth of questions, but even 2 or 3 targeted questions helps a lot.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I think that when you ask question, sometimes when you want to ask a question, one of the things that we talked about with even high school students is the power of asking, not just question, but asking for information, asking to know what's out there for them, because this is what we want the show is about, is really develop the curiosity of those students, and you develop that by asking questions,
Absolutely.
by asking the how to, and so on and so forth. So as someone who mentors, high school students to business competition success, tell me your thoughts on the importance of mentorship, because this is what we are trying to build with Professional Launch. We are trying to build a mentoring platform to connect college students with experienced mentors in the community to help them find a career path. So you mentored many students. What do you think? Tell me about the importance of mentorship.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, that's one of those things I wish I had when I was in high school. You know, to have some type of a mentorship program. I got involved with junior achievement, and I did entrepreneur training or working with a couple of different areas. One of them was at Davies High School.
Yeah.
It was like their business class kids, and we'd spent I think it was six different sessions with them. But it was interesting to see because kids have a great imagination.
Yep.
You know, so one of the things I had them do was, you know, kind of led them into, I put them in groups. I think it was in either 2 or 3 together. And I said, come up with something. Sit around and talk about it. What would be a thing that you have a passion for that you think there'd be a market for? You know, just think it through a little bit. So they did that for one session. And toward the end of that class period, I said, okay, come up with somewhat of a plan. And let's talk about that the next time. So what I did with them then, the next class period, I did a Shark Tank thing with them. I gave them all about 10 minutes to come up with a presentation that'll knock my socks off that I would want to that I would want to put money in their idea. Some of their ideas were, let's just say they weren't viable, but they were creative. I'm going to give them that. It was creative, but not. But there was like 3 or 4 of them that came up with something that was like, you know, that could work.
Yep.
And I actually told them that after we got done. I go, you might want to look into that a little bit more. You know, do some studying with it, and maybe get on the internet and just look some of that, and see what's out there. Because it says it's not a silly idea. So I mean, it's that kind of thing, is to encourage them, and even the ones that had the corny ideas. It's not that they were bad; it's just that they weren't viable. But if they changed their idea a little bit, that might be something they could do.
Yeah.
So it was fun to keep them going.
Yeah, wonderful. You know, when you were talking about this, I couldn't help but thinking about a couple of weeks ago. I was at the possibility showcase at NDSU, where students would come up with ideas and pitch their ideas. My goodness, I was really impressed by the kind of problems that the college students are trying to solve. And some of them, they were not, entrepreneurs. You know, they are not in business school. They were just regular students in different fields trying to come up with solutions for problems. And I think that was really, really, really impressive. And so, as you know, we only have 1 hour for this interview, and we have to talk about professional launch. We have to talk about your career, and you have many layers in your career. But I want to shift for a little bit to talk about you as a mayor. You served 2 terms as a mayor of Horace. What was your most memorable moment as mayor, especially during such rapid growth?
Most memorable? I think the most memorable was sitting down with Dr. Flowers from West Fargo, talking about, you know, where Horace is going and some of the things that we're doing. And they talked about bringing a campus, like the middle school, high school, down to Horace, and realizing that possibility, and then seeing that dream basically come true, where we had a school back in Horace again. To me, that was an achievement, just because the town had a school up until like 1962, 68, somewhere in that frame. And 62 years later, we were able to all get back together for a ribbon cutting ceremony for a high school, middle school complex in Horace. I mean, to me, that was big, because we were a town on the grow. You know, not to take West Fargo's phrase, but you know, it's just we were growing very rapidly, and we knew that, you know, something that the school district was going to expand very quickly. And to me, that was a major accomplishment, being able to get that ushered through, and then all the infrastructure that went along with bringing in a new high school, because it was in the middle of a cornfield. You know, so we had to update what I call a prairie road into it's a concrete road right now, so it can handle the bus traffic. We had to put in a roundabout that got people a little grumpy, but you know, in the end, it all worked out, and I think that to me was a big accomplishment.
Wonderful. So, you know, if you have your proudest moment, you have your best memorable moment, there have to be some challenges that go with that. What would you say was the most challenging part of leading the city as a mayor?
Getting people to understand the growth is coming, the change is coming. The change happened so rapidly. It's tough, and I mean, I know that too. You could see it coming, so how do you buffer that a little bit? Because taxes went up. You know, and that's a tough one on everybody. I mean, even my house got taxed too. You know, I mean, we see it coming. But that all comes with the growing town. You'd rather have a growing town than a shrinking town.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so and obviously there's other little things that happen that you don't see coming, unforeseen circumstances
Yeah, yeah.
that tend to put a damper on things, but you have to always look at the positive. It's like, okay, so we went through this, now you learn something, now we move on to the next thing. You can't dwell on those negatives. I'd say one of the things, like when I first became mayor, I considered that almost like a startup because we were going to be going through a growth spurt.
Yep.
In a startup business, you got to come up with a business plan. Well, that's where you come up in the city. It's a comprehensive plan. Where do you want this thing to be?
Yeah.
You know, what do you want to do with it? How's it going to look? You know, it's the same thing when you're starting up a business. How do you want this to look? Where you want to be with this thing in 10 years?
Yeah.
You know, you try and forecast that. You do the same thing in the city. You're trying to say, okay, here we are. What mechanisms do we need to put in place so that we are here in 10 years or so? You know, so it's forward thinking. It's trying to always look at the big picture. It's the same thing as small business, just like you would as running a city.
Wonderful. We're gonna take another short break here. When we come back, we're gonna talk to the mayor about how can young people get involved in their communities early in their careers. We'll be right back. So we are back. Today we have the former mayor of Horace here in the studio for a professional lunch. Mignon, we are having so much fun with this conversation. And we were talking about mentorship earlier. But one thing I want, as I mentioned that in every show, is really talking about what I want professional lunch to be. It's a resource for young professionals who are launching their careers. And so how can young people get involved in their communities early in their careers?
Right. So almost every community's got some type of a service organization.
Yeah.
You know, that's another, and I know it's not the cool thing to do, and I understand that because, you know, I have kids too, but it's one of those things, if you want to make connections, the older people usually have a lot of skills that they may not wear out on their sleeve, but if you start talking to them a little bit, you might learn some things that might save you a lot of money if you're trying to start a business. You know, that's something that I wish I'd have had a little bit more. I didn't know about SCORE. You know, senior executive retire, if I'm senior core of executive retire, I don't remember the exact thing, but it's the guys who've been there, done that, okay? And they are a wealth of information. Those guys, they will steer you from doing stupid things, okay? And that's where I wish I'd had some of that mentorship early on. So that's what I'm saying. There's different service clubs. Just getting involved with them and talking to people, they will help you avoid making some of the pitfalls that you may not be aware of. And some of them are very subtle, but they can save you a lot of money. Like one of the things that I've told people who want to start a business, especially if they're just like fresh out of college or fresh out of school, it's like, have you actually spent any time in that industry? Have you been employed in that industry? That's how you'll learn more of the ropes. And then you can see what needs to be tweaked or what needs to be made better. And you got all that whole company to ask questions of.
Yep.
You know? And then if you think you can do better, and sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, but at least you know then you're going in with eyes wide open as opposed to one being closed and the other one winking. You know?
Yes. Oh my goodness. You know. That's right. And especially now, I'm glad you mentioned that because this is graduation time, and we were talking about that earlier, right? And so I'm not saying all, but some students might think that just because they graduate from college, now they don't have to learn, they don't have to do things. A former professor told me that, you know, after college, that's where the real learning begins, right? And so can you share a little bit on how they can best, you know, maybe begin to change that mindset that college, you say they just get a little piece of paper and that's it.
I know that's the thing. I think we all thought that way too. Like, you know, when you're doing your interviews toward the end of your college career, doing interviews, you're thinking, oh, I can do all this. I can do all this. It's different once you sit in that seat the first time because it's not exactly like it was in class. And it's not always directly like out of the books. The books give you kind of a look in the right direction, but it might be different when you sit in that seat the first time.
Yep.
You might not realize that you're going to have a report done by Thursday, or you might, all these different things that you didn't really have to do. You mean you had to generate some stuff in college, but it's different once you get into the corporate world.
Yep.
And it's one of those things. And the thing I'll tell people, okay, when you start your freshman year of college, you may not be in that same mindset by the time you get to your senior year. What you thought you were really passionate about your freshman year, you pay by the time you're a sophomore and have taken some of those classes, just like I did,
Yep.
it doesn't work. And I got to switch, go to plan B. And that's where I would suggest too, if you're even thinking about that, go talk to a counselor, because they'll kind of lead you through, what is your passion? It was this, what's the next one? And I'll tell you this too, you'll graduate with a degree. It doesn't mean you're going to get in that field. You graduate with a degree, you might go into something 180 degrees different because it was there for you.
Yep.
So don't get hung up on that degree all the time.
Yeah. So, what do you wish more young professionals understood about networking? Earlier, we were talking about, relationships. This platform is about creating an opportunity for people to have, great professional relationships. So, question to you. So, what do you wish more young professionals understood about networking and building relationships?
It's huge. I mean, that's the thing too. When you are doing this, I know that on some of the certain campuses, they have like a professional get-togethers. I know that the FM Chamber has a young professionals group. These are the social settings that they get together with, and people can mingle and talk. Now, if you're an introvert, I understand that could be a little bit of a problem, but step outside of the box, out of your comfort zone, because you're going to have to do that at some point. This would be the time to do it, to do the networking, meet other people. Some of them might be in your profession that can give you some awesome advice that you hadn't even thought of before.
Yeah.
And that's what we're after here, is to try and make sure that the younger people, especially the ones getting out of college, because it's going to be a culture shock once you hit the corporate world, that they have a better clue of what they're getting themselves into. Once they get that piece of paper and run out the door with their graduation in hand, okay, then the real world hits in, and they'll be better prepared for that when they've had more mentorship to understand how this all works.
Wonderful. And you mentioned mentorships. You kind of lead to my next question. You've led youth programs, coach sports. What do young people need most from mentors today? What do you think?
I think it's just the general direction initially, and then let them start asking questions.
Yeah.
Because I want them to ask the questions, because you getting up there talking for 15 minutes and babbling on doesn't mean anything.
Yep.
You want to get to what are they thinking? What's their concern? And then be able to answer that in a meaningful way. That's what I'm after.
Wonderful. I don't know if some of the folks who probably listen to this conversation or watching this conversation right now don't know that I'm from Haiti, but you have traveled to Haiti with Dr. Bergstrom.
Correct.
And you've done mission work in Haiti and volunteer extensively. So what role should service play in a professional life?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm a member of the Horace Lions, or was a member of the Horace Lions, and I'm a member of the Bismarck Lions Club. But I am also a board member on the Haiti Eye Mission. And we started going there in 2016. I went there for 5 years. We brought along some young people, and it was an eye-opener, pun intended, because they didn't realize what they were getting themselves into. We told them, we tried to warn them, but when you go on site there, you're in a third world country, and it's a lot different. But we help people. We did the cataract surgeries, we did the glaucoma treatments. People could see again.
Yep.
That was, to me, the most powerful thing was every morning when we took patches off of people, and they could walk out of that hospital without help.
Yeah.
That's powerful stuff to witness, and that's why, for me, when you have kids going there, I told our mission team, it's like, we should have kids here every year so they can witness this, to understand that you have a lot of cool things. These people don't, but they're still happy. You could be happy too without all this stuff.
Man, I'm glad to have you on today, simply because, I am really grateful to anybody who would leave the comfort of they have here or anywhere from the States, and then travel to Haiti to help, because of how bad some of the situations are in Haiti. And so I am grateful to you, to the iMission team who traveled there and help out. I'm really grateful for that. And so can you share a time, because again we have to switch back and forth with the conversation about careers. Can you share a time where you feel a little stuck or unsure in your career, and how did you work through that?
So I think the probably the time that I was most unsure,
Mm-hmm.
if there was, but there was a time there where I was wondering whether I still stayed in this computer science field that I was in,
Mm-hmm.
or whether I switched gears and get into more of an engineering as opposed to the programming side of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad I stayed with where I was at. I mean, I had an opportunity to switch, and I'm glad I didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the time it's kind of like the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. Not always,
Yeah.
because I asked the right questions.
Yeah. That's true. All right. So, if you could, before we go to break, um, if you could go back and give your 22-year-old self one piece of advice, what would that be? Do we have time to go to discussions? Okay. So, if you could go back and give a 22-year-old one piece of advice, what would it be?
Talk to people, go to a mentorship programs, take an entrepreneur class, so you learn the ropes, so you understand how businesses work. Especially if you're getting into that type of profession where you want to start a business, or whether you want to work in a partnership with somebody else in a business, it helps. But also to glean the advice from the older folks who've been there, done that, because it'll save you a lot of pitfalls.
Okay, wonderful. We're going to take another short break here, and when we come back, we'll ask the mayor about some of the challenges he probably had as a mayor in his journey. We'll be right back. We are back. We have the former mayor of Hoas here today for a conversation. And one thing I did for our conversation, Mayor Peterson, is asking some of the folks that I met, and I say, I'm interviewing the former mayor of Hoas today, and any question that you would like to ask. But some of the questions were about I summarized the question because it was all about the challenges that you face with the rapid growth with housing and what have you. So, how do you think you could have? Is there a way that you could have dealt with the challenges that you face with the rapid growth of of Hoas a different way?
Yeah, there might have been. I think one of the things that, when I reflect back on that a little bit, especially when we were starting, like in I suppose it was 2018, 2019 was when things were really getting going. We started seeing a perfect storm coming together where you had the city went through an evaluation, and everybody's property values went up an average of 29% across the city. Well, of course, that's going to get people a little wound up because the state forced us to have to do that. Everybody had to go through evaluation.
Yeah.
Okay. Then the schools were coming. We had special assessments that were coming because of that. We did a citywide special assessment on the roundabout because everybody was going to more than likely be using that roundabout.
Yeah.
And then just the property values were going up. So probably a little bit more communication on that. Probably would have, I don't know if it would have blunted anything, but I'm just thinking maybe some more information up front so they were aware that this was coming. I mean, we did some communication. I don't know whether more would have helped, but in hindsight, it probably wouldn't have hurt.
Wonderful. So I'm glad you kind of smoothed this over because I'm sure some of the folks who asked me to ask you this question, I hope I did okay. And you have received several awards for your service. What does recognition mean to you, and how do you stay motivated to give back?
Yeah, you're talking about the Melvin Jones Awards. That was a surprise to me because you do things you don't expect to get recognition for it. I mean, honestly, that's about the last thing I was concerned about, just doing things. But I won that first award for doing the getting up eye screenings done for the Horace Elementary School. To me, that was just a part of doing something for the community to help the kids. That way, like some of the kids who couldn't see well, we'd find them like within a year. We'd be able to help them out, get them glasses, that kind of thing. It's nice to have the recognition, but that's not what the motivator is. The motivator is to help the community. And to me, it's the kids. I mean, I did a lot of work with kids, as you saw in my bio, helping them, mentoring them. But especially like with the eyes, because if you can't see in school, it makes things a lot more difficult to do. And so Now we're doing eye screenings almost all over the whole West Fargo area, and we're getting help from the other Lions clubs doing it. It's expanded that well, and we're able to help these kids. You know, because one of the things we talk about, lazy eye.
Yeah.
Okay, if you catch them early enough, you can probably fix that. If you can't, that eventually that eye goes blind. So if we catch them early enough, we can probably get that straightened out. So they'll have, it may not be 100% vision, but they'll have a lot more, and it'll be a lot longer than if we don't catch them.
Wonderful, wonderful. So we get to the last few minutes of the conversation. One thing we like to do is remind everyone who's listening or watching this conversation that Professional Launch is a nonprofit organization, and therefore we rely on friends, on guests, on partners to keep this to fuel our mission. And so find us and connect with us and see how you can help. There are many ways you can help. So at the end of the conversation, I'm always looking for advice for young professionals who are launching their careers, right? For instance, you have been in for a startup. One question I would ask is, what advice would you give to someone launching a startup today based on your experience?
So if they have, hopefully they've done their homework, and get some financing, because one of the things that usually kills a startup is not having adequate financing.
Yeah.
And also make sure you put together a good business plan. Have that business plan reviewed by another professional so that they can tell you what some of the pitfalls are, because what you want to do is, if you're going to go for financing, you want to make sure you have a really good business plan with some financials, even though they all know that's speculative, but some financials, and that business plan can back up those financials. And that way you've got a really solid base when you're going in and trying to get people to go with you on this startup.
Wonderful. How about those who are graduating? What advice would you give them today?
I would say, keep your options open. It's a little bit of a tough market out there in certain areas. So just realize that maybe what you graduated in, you might be doing something a little bit different, and understand that might be the better route in the long run anyway.
Wonderful, wonderful. Mayor Peterson, thank you so much for being on Professional Launch today. And I know there are probably a gazillion more questions that I could have asked based on your career, but I want to try something different. I want to have questions for next show for next week. So the question is, how has your mentor helped you? If you are someone who is, in whatever field that you are, if you had a mentor, please share, this and answer to that. How, your mentor helped you in your career. What's the number one lesson that you've learned from your mentor or something like that, just to help me. I want more people to know the value of mentorship. And so I'm going around asking people now to share stories with their mentors, the most valuable lessons you learn from your mentor or something in that sort.
Right. And I think I've laid those out for you, because my mentors, this is where I learned the stuff from.
There you go.
And so I'm just portraying what they've told me, and I'm hopefully that can get passed on.
Yes, absolutely. So this is our show for today. Thank you so much for being on the show today, and thank you for volunteering in the I Mission in Haiti and the whole team. Again, I cannot emphasize this enough. We are grateful for you guys for doing that, and so thank you for being on Professional Launch today. Now, this is the part that I tell you, it's up to you to make today a great day. Have a great day.